Fantastic. Well, again, welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Luis Ojeda. Pronouns are he, him, and I'm an organizing manager here at ACLU NorCal. As always, we record and we send out the slides to everyone after the event. So if anyone wasn't able to join us today, something came up or anything like that, folks will get the recording and the slides. So for those that are on as well, you'll get them. So no need to take notes or anything like that. You'll get all the information that we send after. And then if there's any links as well, those will be linked in the slides so you can utilize the slides to access those. So want to shout out Ashley, who's also here joining us. She's monitoring the chat and helping us with the Q&A. So say hi. There's Ashley.
Hi.
If you haven't already, please do introduce yourself as well in the chat. Let us know your name, your pronouns, and where you're joining us from today. But really excited to have you all here. We've got an exciting program today. We've got some special guests, our lovely colleagues here. So real quick, want to give you all a recap of what to expect tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers shortly. They'll provide an overview and a background on a case that you may have heard already about UFW versus Nome, but we're going to dive deeper into it. We appreciated all of the feedback that folks gave us the prior session. I think folks gave us some good feedback in terms of how we wanted to structure these gatherings. And so some of the feedback that we heard was instead of doing a ton of different topics to really dive deep into one or two. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. We'll share a little bit more about some of the community response related to this case, some individual stories, and then also share some good news, a recent victory related to this case. And then again, we'll have some time for Q&A and also share some opportunities for folks to engage and get active as well in terms of things that are coming up. So with that, I want to introduce my colleagues, Bree and Maricela. They have been super involved in this case. They have a lot of information and knowledge, and they're going to be walking us through everything related to this really important and really like scary, right? I think for folks who maybe heard about it in the news back in January in terms of what was happening in Kern County, it's a lot of heavy things. And so also just wanted to provide folks with a little bit of warning that some of this can be deeply personal, deeply concerning, but it is real. It is something that is happening. And so we really want to appreciate Bree and Maricela for being on and walking us through all of this that's happening. And so with that, Bree, maybe if you want to do a quick introduction, let folks know who you are, and then turn it over to Maricela to introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Luis. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate this case being featured. My name is Bree Bernwanger. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior staff attorney at the ACLU of Northern California. I will pass it to Maricela.
Hi, everyone. Also, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Maricela Sanchez. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm an investigator with ACLU NorCal, and I'm based here in our Fresno office. Alrighty, so let's dive right in. So the case that we're going to be focusing on today is the UFW v. Nome case. We just wanted to start off with some background information just to give you a better idea of what exactly happened that week. So in January, the first day that it happened was actually January 7th, 2025, during the Biden administration. Several dozens Border Patrol agents came to the Bakersfield area, to the Kern County area. They ventured more than 300 miles north of the US-Mexico border to launch this ugly named operation of theirs called Operation Return to Sender. So this operation was a week-long operation in predominantly Latino areas in Kern County and the surrounding area. So I just to put things into perspective as well, like I think a lot of us here at NorCal were just returning from vacation from the holiday break, and I think we're all getting ready to just like start preparing ourselves for Trump 2.0, and then on January 7th, on a Tuesday, like this happens. So I'll go more into details about what exactly it is that took place that week. Next slide, please. Before I do that, I wanted to share some photos of what we started seeing pop up on social media that week. On Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram. I just started monitoring a lot of what was popping up to figure out what was going on. This is a case that this type of raid, this type of operation has not happened in this area since the early 80s. So seeing all of these Border Patrol agent vehicles in Kern County was just, it was terrifying. Up here at the top left corner, you see two agents who are standing outside of a Home Depot getting ready, or I think at this point they had already arrested several day laborers who were gathering outside the Home Depot for work. As you can see, some folks are in like tactical gear, while this other individual is completely in like civilian clothing with just like a ski mask on. Um, Over here on the top right hand corner is the barn, and this is a gas station in a predominantly like ag area corner of Bakersfield. This is a gas station where a lot of like farm workers gather to grab something to eat on their way to work or to put gas like on their way home from work. And here you see some unmarked vehicles and a Border Patrol agent vehicle standing outside the barn. And they unfortunately did arrest several people outside of this gas station. And the other two down here at the bottom, these are just photos of, again, Border Patrol vehicles in different parts of Bakersfield. Some were even outside of Bakersfield in more rural areas like Arvin. Um, on this bottom left-hand side, they pulled over someone right alongside Highway 99. This is if you've been through the valley, you know how busy Highway 99 is, but a lot of these arrests were taking place outside of Highway 99. And then over here as well, again, similar thing at a different gas station. They were just like pulling people over wherever. They were all throughout the community. Next slide, please. So over the span of several weeks after that operation started, or that operation took place, the ACLU foundations of Northern California, of Southern California, and San Diego and Imperial counties worked together to interview dozens of directly impacted individuals and witnesses. It was definitely a group effort. There was an amazing team of amazing ACLU immigrants' rights advocates who knew just how severe the situation was, and we knew immediately that we needed to start talking to people to gather and to learn more about what exactly happened. We reviewed dozens of images, videos, and we also monitored Border Patrol's, specifically the El Centro's sector's social media page, just because they were posting some information about this operation. And also here in this photo you see here, they also mentioned that they wanted to conduct a similar operation in Fresno and in Sacramento, which was incredibly alarming. And so we just knew that we needed to investigate this immediately and gather as many facts as possible to see if we could prevent any future operations happening in Fresno and in Sacramento. Yeah, next slide, please. So during the course of the investigation, what did we find? Like I mentioned earlier, specifically the El Centro district, the El Centro Border Patrol district, pulled over vehicles in predominantly Latino neighborhoods. Um, we saw them outside of a Home Depot. We saw them outside of gas stations. We saw them like just in the streets of areas, roads that are traveled a lot by farm workers, like Highway 99 and also Highway 52. These are highways that folks use and take to get to work. And of course, they targeted people of color and questioned them about their immigration status. We learned that Border Patrol did not ask anyone about their family or their employment or community ties. They did not undertake any evaluation of whether people posed a flight risk. And Bree will kind of get into this a little bit more later on in the presentation. But what we also learned is that if people chose to exercise their right to remain silent, agents conducted searches without warrants or consent. There were several instances where some agents smashed car windows, they slashed tires, and they like ordered or physically removed people out of their vehicles and dragged them to the ground. Um, so yeah, so what we were learning was just absolutely horrible and egregious and unlawful. And this is like the same reoccurring thing that we learned from every individual that we had interviewed. Um, Same situation for each person, pretty much. Um, One other thing too that I wanted to really highlight as well is that I know some folks were probably thinking like, was this ICE or was this Border Patrol? This is Border Patrol. And you may be wondering, what is Border Patrol doing in Kern County? Like, Kern is not, along the US Mexico border. But Border Patrol technically does have jurisdiction to enforce for immigration enforcement anywhere 100 miles from the border or 100 miles from the coast. So Kern County is technically within 100 miles from the coast. So that's why, they drove all the way up here. They drove 300 miles, which is like 6 to 7 hours away from El Centro, which is way down south in Imperial County, all the way up here to Kern County. So what we also continue to find is that just how well planned this was. They created a makeshift processing center in the outskirts of Bakersfield. So anyone that they detained and arrested, they took to this processing center and transported individuals on a bus to El Centro. A lot of these folks were taken on a bus like later on in the evening, and they got to El Centro like the following morning and like early in the morning. We also learned that a lot of people who were arrested were requesting to make a phone call to their families to let them know that they had been picked up by Border Patrol. Some people were given like a quick 2 to 3 minute phone call to just to let them know like I was detained by Border Patrol or by, immigration agents. Others people were denied. So a lot of families, after this operation took place, there were a lot of families in Kern County who didn't know where their family members were. Fathers, mothers didn't come home from work that day. So just I can't imagine just how difficult that must have been for a lot of Kern County families. Um, and as we continued to investigate further, once folks were at the Border Patrol station in El Centro, they were placed in these rooms that are called hieleras or freezers. You may have heard of these rooms or these types of cells from the Trump one or Trump from the first Trump administration and their immigration enforcement. But they were placed in these rooms where it was just like very, very cold. There weren't any beds, like folks had to sleep on the ground or sit on these benches. They were given just like an aluminum type of blanket to keep warm. They were given very little food, terrible food. I think folks have mentioned that they were given like frozen burritos. Um, and yeah, and they were kept here for a very long time. And unfortunately, a lot of people were coerced into signing voluntary departure, which is a form of an immediate expulsion. And this can result in a years-long bar on re-entry to the United States. And when I mean coerced, I mean, I really do mean coerced. People were pressured into signing documents that they were not allowed to see. They were just presented with a digital pad to sign, and that was it. When folks asked to see those documents, they were denied access to those documents, so they didn't know exactly what they were signing. Some people mentioned that the Border Patrol agents told them, like, oh, we just want to confirm your identity and you just need to sign this document here. Or we just need to confirm that you were here, at this Border Patrol station, just sign here. But unfortunately, they ended up signing these voluntary departure, uh, uh, this paperwork to 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 then be immediately removed from the U.S. the following day. And folks didn't realize that that was going to take place until like a few minutes to an hour before they were removed and were taken to Mexicali. So yeah, so it was terrible. A lot of people were coerced into voluntary departure. Um, and of course, a lot of people were also denied access to attorney access. Um, People requested to see an immigration judge to try and get their case heard, and they were also denied that. Border Patrol, these agents lied to individuals. Um, they mentioned to them, you'd be in detention for months or up to years. Um, Again, trying to pressure people into signing the voluntary departure. But in reality, folks have a right to fight their immigration case. Folks have a right to see an immigration judge. Um, and yeah, just goes to show how egregious Border Patrol was with a lot of Kern County residents. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand it over to my amazing colleague Bree, who will go more into the case that we filed.
Thanks, Maricela. Thanks, everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about UFW v. Noam, or United Farm Workers v. Noam, which is the challenge that ACLU NorCal, ACLU SoCal, and ACLU SDIC, along with pro bono attorneys at Kecker Van Nest, filed to challenge the practices that Maricela just described to you. So as Maricela mentioned, the raids happened, they started on January 7th and they continued through that week. Maricela led the investigation that uncovered the clear practices of racial profiling, of arresting people without conducting the right evaluations, and of, perhaps most tragically, coercing and deceiving people into giving up their rights to fight their case in immigration court. So between the first week of January and February 26th, we put the case together. We found 5 brave clients to come forward and challenge these practices, and the United Farm Workers stepped up and joined them to challenge Border Patrol's practices on behalf of all of their members. And we filed the lawsuit. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Maricela just described to you the series of sort of patterns that we saw, the consistent stories that we heard from people who were impacted by these raids. And our jobs, as the lawyers, are to identify how the practices that Border Patrol used in the raids violated people's rights. I want to make one minor correction to something that Maricela said. And that is that although Border Patrol's stated mission is to do immigration enforcement at the border, as opposed to ICE, which its mission is to do immigration enforcement in the interior of the United States, agents from both agencies do have legal authority to do immigration enforcement anywhere in the United States. There are some particular rights that Border Patrol has within 100 miles of the border One example is Border Patrol can board public buses, can board like public vehicles without a particular reason to believe that someone is committing a violation within 100 miles of the border. But generally speaking, both agencies can do immigration enforcement in the interior of the country, but they have to follow the Constitution and federal law no matter where they are. And some of the patterns of rights violations we saw, I'm going to kind of go through what the rights are, and then we can talk about how the facts that we saw really lined up with this. So first, you might all be familiar with the Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution. The Fourth Amendment prohibits what the legal language is unreasonable searches and seizures. In plain language, what that means is police, and that includes immigration agents, law enforcement personnel, they can't search you without a reason. They can't stop you, physically detain you, or arrest you without a reason to believe that you are doing something that violates the law. And as their actions escalate in the way that you are deprived of your own personal liberty, the reason that they have to have the bar gets a little bit higher each time. So obviously, from what Maricela described, we saw clearly that Border Patrol, which, just to respond to a question in the chat, Border Patrol is a federal agency. So California doesn't have a Border Patrol, and California doesn't have an immigration enforcement agency. When we talk about Border Patrol, we're talking about the United States government, the federal sub-agency of Customs and Border Protection. ICE is also a federal agency. So we saw, anyway, going back to the Fourth Amendment piece, we saw Border Patrol was pulling people over. Well, when you stop a vehicle, that person is detained. Like when someone pulls over your car, you're not free to go because you can't get out and leave your car behind, and you can't just drive away. So you have to have a reason to believe that a person is in the car is violating the law before you pull them over. Someone looking like they are Latina is not a legal reason. And it has been the law of the land since 1975. The Supreme Court applied this already long-standing doctrine to Border Patrol, operating in vehicle stops near the southwestern border, but not at the southwestern border. So the Fourth Amendment law was clear. You can't pull people over unless you have a reason, a specific reason about that person to believe that they are violating a law that that particular officer is allowed to enforce. Federal Border Patrol is not allowed to enforce California vehicle law, so they can't pull you over for a traffic stop. They're the federal government. The federal government doesn't have anything to do with California traffic laws. So it seemed very clear that the practice of pulling people over because they were brown, because they looked like farm workers, that violated the Fourth Amendment. The same thing is true for people who were arrested, day laborers in the Home Depot parking lot. Immigration officers are allowed to ask you questions, and you are allowed to voluntarily answer their questions or decline to answer their questions. They can ask you any questions they want as long as you are free to go. But the second you're not free to go, they need to have had a reason to have stopped you. And one of the things we saw across the stops and arrests at Home Depot and in gas stations, parking lots, across the operation, is that Border Patrol agents grabbed people and detained them first and asked questions later. That is not permissible. You have to have a reason before you deprive someone of their liberty. Maricela also touched on the fact that there was no investigation into flight risk, whether people were likely to escape if they weren't detained. And that's important because in addition to the constitutional limits on Border Patrol and other immigration agents' authorities, Congress passed laws that give them certain authorities and also that proscribe or limit their authorities in other ways. And one of those laws says that if a Border Patrol agent or an ICE agent, if any immigration officer is going to arrest a person without obtaining a warrant for their arrest beforehand, they have to establish not only probable cause that the person is violating an immigration law, is in the country unlawfully, but also probable cause that the person is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained. And we're not writing on a blank slate here about what it means for someone to be likely to escape. ICE conducted raids in Chicago back during the first Trump administration, and they were sued over them. In the settlement for that lawsuit, ICE reached an agreement and issued a policy that explained what this probable cause of flight risk means. And it would be logical to any of us. Someone is not likely to flee when they have strong community ties and a family and a home in the area. Someone is not likely to flee when they have been living in Kern County for decades and is raising their children there. That was already ICE's interpretation of what this law means and requires. Border Patrol threw it out the window. They arrested people without even bothering to find out whether they needed to arrest them and detain them in order to make sure they showed up at an immigration court proceeding. Finally, we saw clear Fifth Amendment violations. The Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution guarantees you due process before you are deprived of your life, liberty, or property. And in kind of the third pattern that we saw in the operation, which was people being carted down to the El Centro Border Patrol station and deceived, coerced, or otherwise forced to accept voluntary departure instead of going through immigration court proceedings, we saw a clear denial of due process. I think it's important to flag here that people who have been living in the country regardless of their immigration status, courts have held for years that they have a fundamental right to a hearing before they are removed from the country. And when I say a hearing, like there are all kinds of problems with immigration court hearings, but you have the opportunity to present evidence. You have the opportunity to apply for forms of relief from removal. There are a lot of ways people can qualify for immigration status, but they have to be able to go to court and make their case in order to do that. Voluntary departure, so-called voluntary departure, as Maricela said, expels people from the country without a hearing. They give up their rights. They don't get a deportation order. It's true, it's not a formal deportation, but depending on how long they've already been in the United States, they can face a bar on reentry, including legal reentry. Like even if they have a legal basis to come back into the country, they are barred for up to 10 years, which is an incredibly devastating effect. So courts have also held for years that it's really important that if you're going to give up that right, your waiver of your right to a hearing has to be knowing, which means you have to understand what you're giving up, and voluntary, which means it has to be your decision. No one can force you into it. And clearly that did not happen here. Next slide, please. Just to really briefly put this case in context, I think it's fair to say these were some of the first, I mean, these were the first large scale raids, certainly that we saw in California this year. And in many ways, they were a harbinger of what was to come under the Trump administration. On the left side of the screen, I just pulled a few headlines from other raids we've been hearing about across the country, conducted by both ICE and Border Patrol. In Tennessee, ICE agents, along with Tennessee Highway Patrol, have been roving the highways and pulling people over in much the same way we saw in our case. In Maine, Border Patrol from a very remote rural area of the northern border have been going into the state and arresting people. It appears largely based on racial profiling. In Florida, we've seen the same types of highway patrol activities. Although the raids in Kern County were incredibly unjust and violated the law, one of the things we can see when we compare what happened here to what has happened in Nashville and the Nashville area in Tennessee and in Florida is that our sanctuary laws make a huge difference. In Tennessee and in Florida, local and state police are allowed to assist ICE, Border Patrol, immigration authorities with their arrests. That is a huge force multiplier. In Florida, there were 800 arrests in I think about a week, a 4-day operation in Kern County and the surrounding area and return to sender. At least from what Border Patrol reported, there were 80 people arrested. We believe many more were impacted, but 80 arrested and taken to the El Centro station. 80 people is too many. The tactics that were used in Operation Return to Sender were illegal, but by not allowing local and state police to participate in this operation, its impact was limited by a lot. So I just want to flag how our sanctuary laws make a huge difference here, and we have to keep fighting for them because they are protecting the community in ways that we don't necessarily see. On the right side of the screen, I also just wanted to flag, although these raids were incredibly unusual in the sense that we hadn't seen Border Patrol come into the interior of the valley like this in, decades. Um, it is not unusual to see Border Patrol violate the law in the ways that they did here. And it is something that ACLU affiliates across the country have been fighting for years. Border Patrol has gone into Washington state and pulled people over without cause. Border Patrol around the Arizona border, which was where the 1975 Supreme Court case first came up, with Border Patrol stopping people without a reason to stop them. The Arizona affiliate has been fighting these practices of racial profiling for years. There are so many more I could have pasted in here, but it's part of a long-term pattern that we've seen over the years. Border Patrol has failed to respect people's rights, but it certainly was a real shift in tactics here in California. Next slide, and I think I will pass it to Maricela.
Yeah, so after this incident or this operation that took place in Kern County, um, the community of Kern County just really gathered together and rallied in support of the immigrant community. As most of you are probably aware, like the Central Valley, the Kern County area is incredibly ag heavy. There's a lot of agriculture here. We have a large number of farm workers in the area. And so, yeah, so a lot of families were affected by these raids. And so the community gathered together to mobilize and to see how they could support um, impacted families, and also how to ensure that other people in the area are aware of what their rights are if they do encounter Border Patrol or ICE. So immediately after, I think like the first or second day of this operation, the UFW Foundation and the Kern County Rapid Response Network gathered together to hold Know Your Rights trainings, and to also have just some type of like listening session with the community, and just to try and gather people together to figure out what the heck had happened. So yeah, so just wanted to really give a huge shout out to the Rapid Response Network of Kern. They were amazing. Yeah, so in addition to them conducting Know Your Rights trainings, they also helped out a lot of family members of those who were arrested. Um, as you may know, like a lot of folks after, this incredible or this terrible operation took place, a lot of families didn't feel comfortable sending their children to school. A lot of folks did not feel comfortable showing up to work. And a lot of people, or a lot of the local food banks saw a decline in people coming to get food, just because folks did not feel comfortable running errands. They were really worried about getting picked up by Border Patrol. So the Kern County Rapid Response Network also gathered together to connect with food banks and to get food to families in need, and also to distribute just know your rights information online, in person. Yeah, just it just goes to show how important rapid response networks are in your community. Um, and in addition to this, a lot of people showed up and supported their community by protesting. There is this massive protest about a week after this operation took place, where hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 protesters gathered together in Bakersfield um, to protest what Border Patrol had done to their community. That's a photo here, down here at the bottom left, where you can just see a lot of people there with their signs, really just, you know, showing up and rallying and trying to get other people to support, their community in Kern County. Um, I think what from connecting with our colleagues at the ACLU SoCal affiliate who are part of the Kern County Rapid Response Network, they also saw an uptick or an increase in volunteers with the Rapid Response Network. A lot of people saw just the need and the importance in having volunteers be the eyes and ears of the community to document, to report, and to verify any suspected ICE or Border Patrol activity. So a lot of people gathered around the Kern County Rapid Response Network, and also I would say other networks in other parts of the valley, like here in Tulare and Fresno, Madera, Merced. Um, we saw the impact that this raids had not only on Kern County, but the chilling effect that it had across the valley floor. A lot of people wanted to find ways to get involved. And so we also started really mobilizing people into joining their rapid response networks, which is great because we really do need that. We do need people to be the eyes and ears of their communities to document and to report any immigration enforcement. But yeah, there was just a massive response, not only in Kern County, but in definitely in the rest of the valley. Um, and it's really nice to see people come together to really rally for the immigrant community. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the impacts of the raids. Yeah, so based on what Border Patrol stated, it seems like there are around 78 people arrested. And I agree with Bree. I feel like there were definitely more people who were affected, but we just don't know that exactly just yet. Hopefully we can learn more information soon. But at least 40 of those 78 who were arrested are now in Mexico. These folks were separated from their families and are unsure of when they'll be able to return. A lot of these folks too, we don't know exactly who these individuals are, just because it was hard to connect with people who had already been deported. But for some of the individuals that we did connect with, a lot of them have been living here in the valley for decades. They had well-established roots. They had families here, well-established jobs in the area. So it's just really sad to see how families were torn apart by this operation and by Border Patrol. Um, yeah, so I highly recommend that you do watch this Cal Matters Evident Media documentary about the raids. Maybe we'll include the link in the chat. But this documentary goes a little bit more into detail about how the community wasn't impacted by these raids. It was shot here in Kern County, and yeah, you'll be able to see more of just how people were affected by this. So highly recommend this documentary when you get a chance. Next slide, please. And one story I wanted to highlight is the story of one of our plaintiffs. She's incredibly brave. just such a smart person, a kind and a courageous individual, Maria Guadalupe Hernandez Espinosa. Maria, we got in contact with her through the help of the Kern County Rapid Response Network and through other partners. Um, but Maria was one of the individuals who was unfortunately coerced into signing a voluntary deportation paperwork. So, like how I mentioned earlier, Maria was one of the individuals who was not allowed to read any of the documents that they had her sign. Even though she asked multiple times to see the documents, she was denied that opportunity. She, yeah, she again asked multiple times to see a judge, to see an attorney, to call her family, and they just ignored her pleas over and over and over again. This is obviously a very traumatic experience for her, to which she experienced multiple anxiety attacks. Um, just being in Border Patrol custody. And yeah, unfortunately, she's now has been separated from her adult children that live in the Kern County area. And she's unsure of when she'll be able to return. But Maria mentioned, just like this is an important quote that we included in our press release from Maria, but this is what she said. They stopped us because we look Latino or like farm workers. Because of the color of our skin, it was unfair. I hope our rights are protected so that all workers can work and live in peace. When we got in contact with Maria, I just remembered something that she shared, that she just didn't want this to happen to anyone else in the future. Like that was one of the driving motivations for her to be a plaintiff in our case and to share her story, with the public. She did not want this to happen to other people, and she just mentioned and reiterated over and over of how unfair it was. She was on her way home from work from Tehachapi, driving back to Bakersfield, and they were pulled over along Highway 52 by Border Patrol agents. She was with her partner and another friend in the vehicle. And at first, she didn't realize that it was Border Patrol. She thought it was police. And the reason why is because these individuals did not identify themselves at first when they pulled them over. Um, so there's just so much more to her story, and it's all listed in our complaint, which I highly recommend you read. But I applaud Maria's bravery and her courage to share her story um, with the public. Yeah, she's just an amazing advocate, and I truly hope that she can return to her family soon. Um, but yeah, that's just one story that I wanted to highlight, Maria's story. Next slide, please. And I'll hand it back to Bree for some really positive, on a more positive note. Go ahead, Bree.
Thanks, Maricela. I think this is a great segue because Maria stood up for her community, even though she is in crisis, and it's a total honor to represent her. And we have successfully secured what's called a preliminary injunction from the federal court in Fresno, which covers the entire Eastern District of California, from Kern County all the way up to the Oregon border, that prohibits Border Patrol from using the stop and arrest practices that it used in this operation. A preliminary injunction is an emergency court order. It is only issued in extraordinary cases. It is an order that, before a case has been fully resolved, stops the defendant from doing the same unlawful conduct that triggered the case. So it's not a final order. It is in place while the lawsuit is ongoing. And the goal is to stop other people from being harmed during the lawsuit. And we were really encouraged that the judge in our case saw the urgency that this community was facing, saw the harm that the community experienced from the first raids, took Border Patrol at its word in its many public statements where it said that they were coming back to do this again, and issued an order that stops it. So the order, in many ways, makes Border Patrol follow the law. Um, they are not permitted to stop people without reasonable suspicion, which means something specific about the person that they're stopping, that they are not lawfully in the United States. And she also made clear that means you can't stop someone or grab them because they exercise their right to remain silent or because of the color of their skin. And they're also prohibited from arresting people without warrants, without evaluating whether that person is actually likely to flee. The judge also issued some relief that will help us as the lawyers in the lawsuit monitor what Border Patrol is doing. They have to produce documentation of their stops and arrests to us. They have to train their officers on these requirements, and they have to issue guidance that we in the court get to review to explain to officers how they can go about respecting people's rights in their day-to-day jobs. They shouldn't have to do that, but they've shown that they really can't be trusted to do it on their own without a court intervention and without us watching. We did not seek an injunction on the due process claim. So that's the part about coerced voluntary departure. But in the case overall, we are trying to get Maria back, and we are trying to make sure that Border Patrol cannot deceive or coerce people into voluntary departure in the future. And so far, I'm really proud to say that we have been successful in getting emergency relief from the court that should stop raids like this from happening again. Next slide, and I think it's either Maricela or Luis next.
Yes, thank you so much to both Bree and Maricela. I wanted to share a few ways that folks can take action. It's so inspiring to hear stories like that of Maria and all the amazing work that's happening to get some justice, right? Obviously, this has taken place and has had devastating impacts on so many folks in Kern County. But again, appreciate the good news that Bree is sharing and this injunction that is currently in place. So for everyone, we want to encourage you to look out and report ICE and Border Patrol activity in your community. We'll once again share some of the rapid response networks in your community, but definitely like that's really critical right now, right? Like this was back from January. Things have escalated. Some of the examples that Bree shared, right? Things have escalated even more so across the country. Currently in Congress, they are seeking billions of dollars in new funding for immigration enforcement that will have more of a devastating impact on our communities. And so unfortunately, there's going to be more ICE and Border Patrol activity. And so it's going to be really important for everybody to be on the lookout, see what's going on in your community, and to report those when you see them. Additionally, it's really important for folks to know your rights. And so we want to encourage you to attend Know Your Rights trainings, to help host them yourself, put them together, promote them, share them with folks who could really benefit from those things, and to really spread awareness. So we've got lots of Know Your Rights information on our website. We've got little pamphlets. You may be familiar with red cards or other ways of sharing information. So really want to encourage folks to make sure that you are passing that information out, because that's really going to be very helpful and useful for folks if they find themselves in those types of situations. We've shared this slide with you again before, and again, these links will be in the slides that we share with you. But again, there are rapid response networks all across the state, and so we want to encourage you to get familiar, visit their websites, volunteer, in any way that you can, support these local networks, and also save these numbers in your phones. So when you do see, or if you do see ICE or Border Patrol or other immigration activity, that you report those so that we can confirm and verify and support folks who are impacted by immigration. Perfect. So we've got some time for some Q&A. I think we have some questions lined up in the chat, or in the Q&A, excuse me. So let's take a look at those, and then, okay, we had one question that was answered. Hillary has a question. Hillary said it may not be relevant, but if so, can CHP's broad mandate to patrol anywhere also be mentioned? I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but Bree, if you have thoughts on that one.
I think you're talking about California Highway Patrol. Um, yeah, I think here what California Highway Patrol cannot do is enforce immigration law. So there's a clear divide here. California Highway Patrol cannot enforce immigration law. They can't pull someone over because they suspect that they're not in the country lawfully. It's just not something that they're authorized to do. And conversely, Border Patrol can't pull someone over for traffic violations. So I think, like, at least from my perspective, kind of the answer on this question and in terms of what we're talking about in this webinar is a highway patrol. I'm not an expert on highway patrol's operation outside the immigration context, but California sanctuary laws prohibit our law enforcement from doing immigration enforcement.
Great, thank you. We had another question about from Paul, how are Border Patrol agents identifying themselves and their vehicles? I think Maricel, you shared a little bit of that, but anything else you could say in terms of what you heard that was happening on the ground and how Border Patrol was identifying themselves?
Yeah, I mean, Border Patrol wasn't identifying themselves really until after the fact, until people were arrested and handcuffed. That's when they mentioned like you're being detained by Border Patrol. Um, the other way that maybe folks realized that it was Border Patrol apprehending them was the type of vehicle. That's if they were pulled over by the vehicle with like the clear like green mark and it says like US Customs and Border Patrol on the vehicle. That's how some people knew that it was Border Patrol pulling them over and not like local police. But again, in other cases, people were pulled over by unmarked SUVs, by unmarked trucks that had like flashing police lights attached to them. So people assumed that it was like, I don't know, undercover police officers pulling them over. But yeah, I think in all the cases that or the folks that I interviewed, Border Patrol identified themselves after people were handcuffed.
Thank you. We've got kind of a long question here, and let's see if we have some thoughts on this one. So Miranda asks, how does the child attainment and reunification process for children separated in these circumstances differ from traditional child welfare, dependency, family policing separations? Do we have numbers or specific detention centers where impacted babies and youth are being taken, or are they placed in California foster care?
We unfortunately don't have information about that. I genuinely don't know whether any children were left completely unattended because both parents were detained in this raid. That isn't something that I heard of happening. It's absolutely something that our clients were afraid of. And one of the things we heard in the aftermath was farm workers were trying to get jobs on different work sites so that there was less of a likelihood that they would both be pulled over, detained, whether like unlawfully in response to the raids, and that this was happening kind of regardless of immigration status because of the use of racial profiling. But in terms of your specific question about the process, unfortunately, that's not something I can answer.
Mickey has a question about, it says, can local law enforcement in California research and disclose to media information about the criminal convictions of persons detained by ICE agents in the country, which is probably public record, but not generally known? This clearly supports or appears to justify ICE actions.
This is such an interesting question. I have to say this is just not something that I have looked into recently, and so I hesitate to answer it here because I think it's a thorny question and it didn't come up in this case, and I just don't want to say the wrong thing.
Great. We have another question about from Sue. Please explain more clearly what California sanctuary law says. Is there a statewide sanctuary law and what does it prohibit? Are there additional municipal or county sanctuary laws to bar sheriffs or police from assisting Border Patrol in stopping vehicles?
So I think the answer to this is longer than we have time for, but there is a statewide sanctuary law, and local law enforcement are not allowed to permit ICE with immigration enforcement or Border Patrol. I think that's the simplest way to say it. Um, they are not allowed to hold people longer than their sentences if they are in custody. But like in terms of what we saw in this raid, local law enforcement is not allowed to go out into the community and help ICE. Once someone is in custody for a state or local offense, the rules get a little bit more complicated. There are prohibitions on informing ICE about people under a lot of circumstances, but it's like an easy question when it comes to this type of community enforcement. It's just not allowed.
Thank you. And then maybe one last question that might be relevant for folks who are listening in. Carolina, can you talk us through a scenario? I'm stopped by CBP or ICE. I pull out my red card. What should now happen?
Yeah. So one thing that we recommend doing in addition to a red card, even though it sounds counterintuitive, is saying that you're exercising your right to remain silent and asking, am I free to go? Am I free to go is the key question that will give you the answer of whether someone is just voluntarily questioning you or whether you are actually being detained. If you are actually being detained, ask why. But otherwise, say you're exercising your right to remain silent, ask if you are being detained. That is what you should do. What should happen is they should let you go. If they don't, we've seen that they violate the law. If they don't, you will not have revealed any information that could potentially harm or incriminate you.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got lots of questions, so we're going to do our best to compile them and include them in the follow-up email. Maybe we can tap into Bree and Maricela's smart brains and see if they can help us share some additional responses to the questions that we didn't get to. But want to thank Bree and Maricela for their time, for their great presentation, and for sharing all this amazing information. We do want to be mindful of time and wrap up here at 6:30. But before we do, we just wanted to flag a couple of things. So June 14th is a National Day of Action. So while Trump is hosting his military parade in DC, there's lots of protesting happening all across the country. So we want to encourage you to find your local event to attend and be there protesting. Additionally, ACLU National is hosting a training next Tuesday, June 10th at 4 p.m. On Know Your Rights. So some folks were asking questions about Know Your Rights and information. So this specifically will be in preparation for the June 14th Day of Action. But again, we'll include that in a follow-up email. But want to encourage folks to join those events on Saturday, June 14th, and to attend that Know Your Rights training. So again, we will follow up with everyone with the link to the recording and the slides. But as always, feel free to reach out to us at changemakers@aclunc.org. And again, thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us.